When I stepped into the forest management office to inquire about the progress of my research project, Selina, my newlywed daughter-in-law, looked straight into my eyes and smiled coldly. "The permit has been approved." Those words hit my ears like a bucket of ice water. Permit? Approved? I had never signed any document, never agreed to let anyone touch this forest. Yet Selina, with a face radiant, as if she had just achieved a resounding success, declared it as if it were an undeniable truth. My heart sank. My hand clutching the pen felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Before me was a thick stack of documents, bearing a signature in my name but in an unfamiliar script, accompanied by the glaring red seal of the authorities. It all felt like a cruel joke. I had spent over 30 years researching and protecting every tree, every flock of birds in this forest, treating it as the final legacy left by my parents. And now, with one casual sentence, my daughter-in-law had turned it all into a commercial asset in my name. I looked at Ethan, my son, hoping to find defiance in his eyes, but he only lowered his head, avoiding my gaze, letting Selina sit comfortably in her chair, her voice sweet but commanding. "Mom, everything will be fine. This will be the biggest eco-resort in Montana. You'll still be credited as the founder. We'll be both rich and famous." Each word pierced my heart like a twisting knife. In my mind, images of the wooden cabin where I had lived for years, the dawns spent watching eagles soar across the sky, all suddenly became fragile memories that could be erased because of a project I never wanted. Sidelined, exploited, betrayed, not just by Selina, but by the silence of my own son. Standing in that office, my legs trembled as if the whole world had come crashing down. But deep within my heart, a smoldering fire ignited. This forest is my lifeblood, and I won't let anyone, not even family, take it from me. As I left the office that day, Selina's words echoed in my mind, like a haunting whisper from the depths of the forest. "The permit has been approved." I walked along the dirt path, back to my familiar wooden cabin, my heart heavy, but in that dizzying moment, childhood memories flooded back. I could almost hear my father calling from the forest's edge, my mother's laughter as she showed me wildflowers blooming after the rain. My entire life had been tied to this land, every tree, every stream a part of my very being. I was born in a small wooden cabin in the heart of Montana's forest. My father, a ranger with calloused hands and a resolute voice, always taught me, the forest is home. When we care for it, it nurtures us. I remember winter mornings blanketed in snow when he took me on patrols, teaching me to distinguish deer tracks and listen to the wind to guess which birds were hiding in the treetops. By his side, I learned patience and respect for nature. My mother, a biologist, was gentle yet meticulous. She always carried a notebook, jotting down observations, sometimes about the behavior of red squirrels, sometimes about the blooming of a rare orchid. Once, she showed me a tiny white orchid and said, "True beauty is often humble and fragile. Preservation isn't just about saving the grand things, but also the smallest ones." Her words took root in my mind, growing stronger with time. I vividly recall a summer when I was 10, when we found a young eagle with a broken wing beneath a tree. My father placed it in my hands. "Its life is in your care. You can nurture it or let it go." I trembled as I held it, feeling its faint heartbeat. For weeks, our family nursed it. When it healed, I stood with my father, opened my hands, and watched the birds soar into the blue sky. I cried, but in those tears, I knew my life was bound to protecting wild things. From then on, the forest raised me like a second mother. I grew up with the howls of wolves, the calls of owls at dawn, the babbling of streams like a lullaby. While my friends dreamed of big cities, I only wanted to stay in the forest. After studying biology in college, I returned to Montana, rebuilt my parents' cabin, and turned it into a small research station. People called me the old forest woman. I took it as a badge of pride. For 30 years, I tracked wolf packs, deer herds, and most importantly, my white-headed eagle conservation project. I witnessed countless wonders, a doe licking dew from her fawn's forehead, geese flying in a V formation, the lonely cry of a lynx in the summer night, and the moment it rejoined its pack. To me, those images were worth more than any profit from timber or tourism. Ethan, my son, grew up in that same atmosphere. As a child, he'd hold my hand, running through the forest, his eyes lighting up at squirrels leaping between branches or bear cubs peeking from afar. In the evenings, we'd sit by the stream, and I'd tell him stories of his grandparents and why our family had been tied to this forest for generations. Ethan once exclaimed, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll protect the forest like you." I believed him, and for years, I lived with that faith. So when Selina said, "The permit has been approved," and I saw Ethan stay silent, my heart shattered. Could my son have forgotten his childhood memories? How could he stand by as his wife turned my dream into a noisy resort filled with tourists and bulldozers? I wondered if I had been so engrossed in my research that I forgot to teach him the steadfastness my parents instilled in me. But then I realized the forest doesn't belong to me or Ethan alone. It belongs to itself, to the creatures living in every hollow tree, every stream. This fight isn't just about saving a piece of land, but about protecting a legacy, a lifeline that flowed from my parents to me and was meant to continue through Ethan. If my son won't carry it on, I'll be the last one standing guard. I'd rather die as a protector than live to see the forest turned into a commercial tourist trap. That night, I sat alone in the cabin, moonlight streaming through the trees outside the window. The breeze carried the familiar scent of pine resin. I closed my eyes, hearing my father's whisper, "Don't be afraid, Clara. The forest only survives when someone dares to sacrifice for it." Those words woke me. From the moment Selina flashed her smile and casually declared her plans, I knew a battle had begun. And even if my opponent was my daughter-in-law, I wouldn't back down. For my parents, for Ethan, though he doesn't yet see it, and for my very soul. After that moonlit night, I tried to reassure myself that things would become clear, that perhaps Selina had simply misunderstood or exaggerated. But the days that followed quickly proved otherwise. Ethan returned from a rushed honeymoon, bringing his wife to my old wooden cabin with an awkward smile. "Mom, Selina and I thought it'd be better to live with you for now. It'll be nice for you to have company, and we can take better care of you." I looked at my son, my heart softening because my original plan was to give Ethan space after his marriage. But the way he spoke, combined with Selina's gentle gaze, made me relent. Part of me felt warmed, thinking my old age would be less lonely with someone to share the cabin in the forest. Selina certainly knew how to win people over. In the early days, she busied herself organizing things, helping me cook, cleaning, even eagerly learning to tend the vegetable garden out back. In the mornings, I'd find her making tea. In the evenings, she'd prepare dinner and sit listening to me talk about my research. She'd nod along, occasionally exclaiming, "It's amazing that you've dedicated your life to this forest. I really admire you." My heart bloomed at her words. For years, I had longed for a daughter to share with. I thought perhaps God had sent Selina as a belated gift. I started calling Selina my daughter in our daily conversations. Each time she smiled back, my heart warmed. Some evenings, the three of us would eat together. Ethan talking about his new job in town, Selina asking about my forest surveys. The atmosphere felt cozy, familial. I trusted her, believed I had gained another pillar of support. But life is rarely as kind as it appears on the surface. After a few weeks, cracks began to show. One afternoon when I returned early from the forest, I overheard Selina in the kitchen. I was about to walk in, but her voice stopped me. A voice no longer gentle or sweet, but cold, sharp, and brisk, utterly different. "The investors can't wait any longer. They want assurance that the land use rights will be transferred soon." "Yes, I understand, but she's still attached to the forest. Don't worry, I'll convince her. If not, there are other ways." I stood frozen outside the door, my heart gripped as if by a vice. Each word hammered into me like a nail. Investors, that word spiraled in my mind. I realized her initial kindness was a mask. Behind that sweet smile, Selina harbored a different plan, one I couldn't yet fully grasp, but was certainly tied to the forest. I quietly retreated, careful not to reveal my presence. My hands trembled as I closed my bedroom door, my mind in chaos. The sting of betrayal burned through me like a creeping flame. I sat down, trying to breathe deeply, but every sweet moment from the past days shattered. Every hug, every compliment, Every friendly glance now left only the bitter aftertaste of deceit. That night, as I sat across from Selina at dinner, I observed her every move. Her smile remained gentle, her voice still sweet, but I saw a cold glint in her eyes. Ethan seemed oblivious, engrossed in talking about work, and I didn't want to worry him. I stayed silent, keeping what I'd overheard locked inside, but a deep suspicion took root. Selina didn't come here to be a good daughter-in-law, but to execute a scheme. I lay awake all night, recalling my father's warning. In the forest, not every poacher carries a gun. Some use sweet words to fell trees, and some use smiles to hunt beasts. Now I understood. His lesson applied not just to the forest, but to those who enter our lives. And perhaps, the real battle had only just begun. One late afternoon, as the sun faded over the Douglas firs, I was jotting down notes from a migratory bird survey when Selina placed a steaming cup of tea on my desk, her smile bright as if she were about to offer a delightful surprise. Ethan sat nearby, slightly uneasy, fiddling with his coffee mug. Selina brushed her hair back, her voice honeyed. "Mom, Clara, I have a wonderful idea. We could turn this forest into an eco-resort, a true eco-resort. You wouldn't have to worry about research funding anymore, and our family could both preserve the land and profit from it. Everyone would be happy." I set my pen down and looked at her for a long moment. In Selina's eyes gleamed the enthusiasm of someone convinced they'd found the perfect solution. Ethan interjected awkwardly, "I know you're attached to the forest, Mom, but this idea has merit. People would come here, see the value of nature, and it could help with conservation." His voice wavered, less convinced than trying to defend his wife. I took a deep breath, suppressing my frustration. "Selina," I said slowly, "this forest isn't a playground for wealthy tourists. It's a fragile ecosystem where every animal, every stream needs peace to survive. A resort, even labeled green, is still an intrusion. I can't let that happen." Selina didn't flinch. She tilted her head, her gaze almost pitying. "But Mom, if we don't use it wisely, someone else will find a way to. Isn't it better for our family to benefit? Think about it. You could run a research center within the resort, where visitors rest and learn about nature. It's a perfect combination." I let out a dry laugh. Perfect for whom? For those investors out there, or for this forest? "Selina, do you know a single engine's noise can drive migratory birds from their nests? That artificial lights can disrupt an owl's biological rhythm? You talk of conservation, but all you want is money." Ethan frowned. "Mom, don't say that. Selina's just trying to help." But before he could finish, I turned to my son. "Do you remember what I taught you, Ethan? The forest isn't for sale. It doesn't belong to you or me. It belongs to itself. And our job is to protect it." My words cut through the air like a blade, and Ethan lowered his head. Selina kept her smile, but a cold glint flickered in her eyes. She straightened up, her voice slow, feigning humility. "If that's how you feel, I respect it." Maybe I was too hasty. Then she stood, cleared the dishes, playing the part of a dutiful daughter-in-law. But as she turned away, I caught a steely flash in her eyes. Not surrender, but a temporary retreat. That night, lying in bed with the forest humming outside my window, I knew I'd only grazed the tip of the iceberg. Selina wouldn't stop easily. The eco-resort idea was just the beginning. She had a bigger plan, a deeper ambition, and Ethan's silence only heightened my unease. I closed my eyes, but in the darkness, her cold gaze lingered like a smoldering ember, signaling a storm yet to break. In the days following that conversation, an eerie quiet settled over the cabin, tense like a taut guitar string about to snap. Selina remained sweet, still helped with breakfast, still called me Mom in her gentle tone, but her eyes betrayed impatience. Ethan either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. While I stayed on high alert, I began noting not just bird sightings or animal tracks in my journal, but also subtle shifts in my daughter-in-law's behavior. One morning, as I watered the garden, two officials in state environmental agency uniforms knocked on the door. They greeted me politely and opened a file. "We're here to verify details about the application you submitted last month regarding the conversion of forest land for ecotourism." I froze. "Application." I submitted. I repeated, my mind reeling. In all my life, I'd never signed such papers. They exchanged glances, surprised. The file has your signature, Clara W. Here's a copy. They showed me a document with the state agency's logo, a scrawled signature at the bottom. I looked and instantly knew it wasn't mine. I kept my composure, explaining it was a mistake, that I'd never signed. They noted it down, promised to investigate, and left. As the door closed, I gripped the table's edge, my nails digging into the wood, my body trembling with rage. Who had done this? The answer hit me like a thunderbolt. Selina. From that day, I watched her closely. Selina often disappeared in the afternoons, claiming to run errands or meet friends. When I probed gently, she'd reply smoothly, "Just meeting some acquaintances in the city, discussing small business matters. Don't worry, Mom." But I heard the evasion in her voice. Once, from the porch, I saw her climb into a black car parked on the dirt road. A man in a suit, someone I'd never seen, sat inside. Selina got into the back seat without looking back. The car roared off, kicking up red dust, leaving me with a deep sense of unease. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house, consumed by suspicion. Passing the small study Selina used for jotting down ideas, I noticed a drawer, slightly ajar. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a stack of papers, haphazardly arranged. On top was a draft contract, clearly titled Green Front Eco Resort Project Agreement, Montana. I flipped through, my heart pounding. It detailed how Clara W. agrees to allow Green Front to exploit her land. My signature appeared in multiple places, all forged. Worse, there was a red seal, a rough copy, but convincing enough to fool the unwary. I had to sit down, my hands shaking. Each line screamed the brutal truth. Selina wasn't just dreaming. She'd orchestrated a large-scale scheme. She had investors backing her, forged contracts, signatures, even seals. This was no longer a family dispute or minor conflict. It was a legal battle, a crime. I carefully photographed each page, stored them in my private cabinet, then returned the papers exactly as I found them. As I left the room, my heart raced, fearing Selina might appear and catch me, but the house was silent, save for the wind whistling through the window cracks. That night, I sat alone by the desk, watching the fire flicker in the hearth. In my mind, Selina's false smile and sweet voice calling me Mom merged with her cold, calculating plot. I saw her two faces, the dutiful daughter-in-law outside, the schemer inside, ready to trample anyone to achieve her goals. I knew what I'd found was only the tip of the iceberg, with a network of power and money lurking behind, and I understood. From that moment, I could no longer be naive. I had to prepare for a battle against someone who called herself family. In the darkness of the room, my father's words echoed from afar. "Don't be afraid, Clara. Some destroy the forest with guns, others with smiles, but the forest only lives when someone dares to stand up for it." I gripped my notebook tightly, certain I wouldn't let myself become a victim of this deceit. This was only the beginning. I still vividly recall the night I found the draft contract and fake seal in Selina's study. From that day, I couldn't sleep soundly. Knowing I'd seen the draft meant a final version existed somewhere, and Selina had likely prepared more thoroughly than I imagined. For days, I tried to act normal, cooking, surveying the forest as usual, but inside, I was taut as a wire. I resolved to find more evidence, undeniable proof, before confronting her directly. One morning, while Selina and Ethan were in town, buying supplies, I slipped back into their study. The drawer from before was still slightly open. I opened it and found not just the draft but a thick file. My heart leapt as I realized it was the completed land exploitation contract, with more signatures and seals. I flipped through quickly. At the end, a line stood out. Landowner, Clara W. agrees to grant use and exploitation rights to Greenfront for 50 years. Below was my name, signed in a stiff, unfamiliar hand, nothing like my practiced writing of decades. My hands shook, my body chilled as if doused with ice water. I photographed everything, then carefully returned the papers. Questions flooded my mind. Who helped Selina forge the agency's seal? Who gave her the confidence to leave these documents so boldly in the room? I hadn't found answers when something worse happened that evening. Checking my email, a nightly habit before journaling, I found an anonymous message titled, "Warning." Its contents were brief. "Clara, you'd better not interfere. The permit is approved. The investors are signed. If you obstruct, we'll escalate to federal authorities. Then, not only the forest, but your reputation will be gone." I read it over and over, each word cutting like a blade. My throat tightened. They didn't just forge documents, they threatened to paint me as a criminal obstructing a legal project. I felt the world tilt. For years, I'd lived with integrity, dedicating myself to science and the forest. Yet now, with a few forged papers and a threatening email, they could turn me into a villain, opposing progress. I sat for hours in the dark, the wind whistling through the wooden walls, my heart heavy with indignation. But in the quiet night, my mother's words came back. "Science always needs evidence, Clara. Only the truth will protect you." I decided I had to uncover who was behind the forged seals. The next day, I took one of the photographed contract copies to the town library, where there was a photocopier to enlarge the seal's details. Upon close inspection, I noticed something. The red seal bore the initials of the Northern Region's Environmental Agency. I had collaborated with them years ago on research projects. A name flashed in my mind: Mark Hansen, a former administrative officer who had helped me process research documents. I remembered Mark as a middle-aged man, somewhat greedy, often complaining about his low salary. We hadn't been in touch for years, yet now the seal carried the code of the agency where he worked. My heart grew cold. Could Mark have colluded with Selina to legitimize the documents? That evening, I tried calling the old number I had saved. The phone rang for a long time before a man's hoarse but familiar voice answered. "Hello?" I froze, managing only, "Mark, it's Clara." A pause, then a cough. "Oh, Clara. Long time no see. What's up?" I heard the unease in his voice, the kind that betrayed someone hiding something. I went straight to the point. "I saw your agency's seal on a document with my name. Are you involved?" There was a hesitation, then the line went dead. I sat there, stunned. His action was like a confession. There was no doubt now. Selina had bribed Mark, or exploited an old connection to forge the documents. The veil was lifting, and I saw myself standing in the middle of a dirty web of interests, with my daughter-in-law as its figurehead. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They forged signatures, contracts, and threatened to drag me to federal court. I can't hide anymore. It's time to fight, with intelligence and evidence." As I closed the notebook, I knew that in this battle, the enemy wasn't just Selina, but also the powerful hands that once sat with me in conservation meetings, hands now willing to sell the old forest for investment money. I felt pain, but also a clarity I'd never had before. The truth had taken shape, and I would no longer back down. After the failed call with Mark and that threatening email, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. If Selina and those behind her were bold enough to forge signatures, contracts, and seals, they were ruthless enough to make me a victim in a scheme I hadn't yet fully grasped. I needed an ally, someone who knew the law better than I did, someone capable of protecting me, and most importantly, this forest. The first name that came to mind was Grant Williams, a retired environmental lawyer, an old colleague who had worked with me on conservation projects 20 years ago. Back then, Grant was a young, passionate student who would sit for hours listening to me lecture about old-growth forest ecosystems. He later became one of Montana's prominent environmental lawyers. Though we rarely kept in touch, I occasionally saw his name in the papers for defending public lands. I hesitated, but finally dialed his number. When Grant's calm, steady voice answered, I felt as if I'd been pulled from a quagmire. I briefly recounted everything: the forged contract, the seal, the threatening email. He listened silently, then said firmly, "Clara, you did the right thing calling me. This isn't just a family dispute. This is an environmental crime with legal fraud. I'll help you." The next day, I met Grant at a small cafe in town. He brought his laptop and a stack of documents. I handed him the photographed contract and the anonymous email. Grant studied them closely, his eyes narrowing. Green front. I've heard of them. They were accused in another state of setting up shell companies, posing as environmental organizations to attract investors, then disappearing, leaving behind millions and dead projects. I'm surprised they've surfaced here. He typed quickly, pulling up a database. Articles, lawsuits, and stories of victims appeared. My heart clenched. As Grant said, Greenfront wasn't an environmental organization, but a hollow shell for greedy opportunists. The danger, Grant continued, is that they have a legitimate-looking seal and documents in your name. If they escalate to federal level, you could be seen as an accomplice. They want you scared, to give up, and let them take full control. He looked at me, his tone grave. Are you ready to fight? I clenched my hands, anger turning into strength. Yes, I've let them go too far already. From that day, Grant and I began our plan. He guided me on gathering legal evidence, copying all the forged contracts I found, saving every email, and most crucially, recording conversations related to the project. We need undeniable proof, Grant said. So when the time comes, neither Selina nor those behind her have any escape. I turned my wooden cabin into a small investigation hub. I bought a new hard drive, stored all the data, photographed every contract page, and enlarged the fake seal for comparison. I set up a separate email account, forwarding all anonymous messages there. Grant gave me a tiny recorder, no bigger than a finger, and told me to carry it always. Don't confront Selina directly, he advised. Let her reveal herself. In the days that followed, I continued my forest research while quietly collecting clues. I noticed Selina was more cautious, often locking her room when she left, but she still slipped up occasionally. Once, I overheard her on the porch, her voice cold again. Don't worry. The documents have the signature. She won't dare do anything. The investors just need a bit more patience. I sat in my room, hands trembling but heart resolute. This time, I had turned on the recorder. At night, as I wrote in my journal, I felt like I was young again, noting animal tracks and strange calls to unravel the forest's secrets. Now, I recorded every suspicious word and act to expose the truth. The forest was under threat, and I was once again on the front line. Grant scheduled a meeting that weekend to strategize further. We won't just counter Selina, but Greenfront too. You're not alone, Clara. I'll contact some federal colleagues, and when the time comes, we'll bring this to light. I looked at him, remembering the young man who once joined me by streams to find bird nests. Now, he was a tough lawyer, and I was a silver-haired woman, but we shared the same belief, truth and justice. That night, as I turned off the light and saw the moon glow over the trees through my window, I no longer felt despair. Instead, a fire burned quietly in my heart. Selina could forge my signature, deceive Ethan, bribe officials, but she didn't know her opponent was no longer a frail old mother. I had become a warrior, for the forest, for the truth, and I knew this battle was just beginning. As I worked with Grant, my heart grew heavy in a new way. It wasn't just Selina's schemes or Greenfront's malice, but Ethan's terrifying silence. My son, the boy who once ran through the forest holding my hand, lived under this roof yet never asked about the forged documents or showed suspicion toward his wife. That silence hurt more than any threat. I recalled when Ethan was young. Every summer, I'd take him camping deep in the forest. His favorite thing was lying in the tent, listening to the babbling stream, whispering questions about every sound. Mom, what's that? I'd smile and explain. An owl's hoot, a deer's call, the wind through the leaves. Once, at 10, he proudly lit a small campfire and looked at me. I'll grow up strong to protect you and this forest. That innocent promise stayed in my heart like a shining gem. Yet now, in this very house, amidst this storm, Ethan sat silent, pretending not to see. I looked at my son, wondering had I erred in teaching him too much compassion and not enough resolve. Had I let the gap between us widen by devoting my life to the forest? I had hoped Ethan would carry on the legacy, but his silence now cast a long shadow over my old age. One evening, with Selina out, I sat down with Ethan. Gathering my courage, I spoke. Ethan, do you see what's happening around us? Do you know Selina forged documents, deceived both me and the law? He flinched, avoiding my eyes. After a moment's unease, he replied slowly, Mom, I think you're being too harsh. Selina just wants to secure our family's future. You know conservation research doesn't pay, but with a resort, We'd have money and still save the forest. Why can't you see it differently? I was stunned. My son, who once vowed to protect this forest, now echoed Selina's words almost verbatim. His voice wasn't my Ethan's, but her echo. I trembled with pain but pressed on. Ethan, do you remember our camping trips? You said you'd protect the forest with me. Do you remember? He was silent for a moment, then said softly, I remember. But Mom, why don't you want me to have a better future? An easier life? I don't want to live poor forever, looking at the forest without doing anything with it. His words hit like a hammer to my heart. I realized Ethan was no longer that boy. Selina had swayed him, lured by promises of wealth and fame. To him, the forest was no longer a priceless legacy, but a tool for a better future. Tears welled up, but I didn't cry aloud. I sat up straight, looking at my son for a long moment. Ethan, I said, my voice trembling but firm, a future isn't bought by betraying the past. You want money, I understand. You want an easier life, I understand. But this forest isn't mine or yours. It's the lifeblood of countless creatures. If you choose Selina's side, I'll still stand, but alone. I've done this my whole life without fear, and I'll keep doing it, even if you turn your back on me. Ethan looked at me, a flicker of emotion in his eyes, but he quickly looked down, saying nothing. That silence cut deeper, confirming my fear. My son had drifted far from my reach, at least for now. That night, I returned to my room, opened my worn notebook. On the page, I wrote, if you won't stand for the truth, I'll fight alone. Closing it, I felt both a fresh wound and a quiet strength rising. I knew I'd lost my son's companionship, but I also knew sometimes to protect what's sacred, you must walk alone. After that evening's talk with Ethan, I knew the bond between mother and son had cracked deeply. I held a faint hope that one day he might wake up, but that hope was quickly crushed when days later, I heard Selina was holding a major press conference in town to announce Montana's most modern eco-resort. The news spread like wildfire. That morning, at the grocery store, I overheard neighbors whispering, they say Clara's Forest will become a resort. Great idea. Tourist spots and jobs for locals. I stood frozen, my hands gripping the cans in my basket until they rattled. People believed I had agreed to give up the land, and Selina had masterfully staged a perfect play to push me to the sidelines. On the day of the press conference, I had no intention of going, but my heart urged me. If I didn't witness it myself, I'd never know what they were turning my forest into. So I put on my heavy coat and went to the town's main hall. The banner outside stabbed my eyes like a knife. Greenfront Eco Resort, blending nature and sustainable development. Below it was an image of a luxurious resort, with pools, villas, and paved roads cutting through pristine forest. I walked in, the room packed. The front row held well-dressed local officials, nodding to each other. Behind them, reporters raised cameras, flashes popping. On stage, Selina stood with the confidence of a successful businesswoman, dressed in a teal suit. Her face glowed, as if this was her life's greatest day. Her voice rang clear through the microphone. The Greenfront Eco Resort will not only bring great profits to the community, but also raise conservation awareness. This isn't just a resort. It's an ecological education center where visitors will learn to love the forest while enjoying modern comforts. The room erupted in applause. I sat silently in the back, clutching my bag. I looked at the flyers they handed out. Images of my beloved forest, now a tourism product. Streams and meadows turned into attractions. A small line on the flyer read, "Project under the name of Clara W., landowner." My heart felt torn apart. But the biggest shock was yet to come. As the stage lights brightened, I saw Ethan standing tall beside Selina, his face stern. He wore a crisp suit, tie knotted tightly, hands in pockets. When Selina introduced him, "And this is my husband, Ethan, my partner in this journey," the room clapped again. Ethan gave a faint, forced smile and bowed slightly. In that moment, I felt I had lost my only son. I remembered the night he said, "Mom, why don't you want me to have a better future?" Now the answer was clear. He had chosen Selina's side, choosing wealth and promises of fame over childhood memories. Under the forest canopy with me, Seeing Ethan hold Selina's hand for the cameras, I felt an indescribable pain. Selina went on, presenting slides of eco-friendly wooden villas, playgrounds, and spas. Each time she said conservation, the audience nodded, while I wanted to leap up and shout, "This isn't conservation, it's destruction." But I held back, knowing that reacting now would make me the stubborn old woman in their eyes. I needed evidence, truth, and the right moment. When the conference ended, the crowd spilled out, some taking flyers, others buzzing about the new economic opportunity. I stepped outside, breathing Montana's cold air to keep from collapsing. The sky was clear but heavy, and in the wind, I heard the forest's lament. I knew the battle was now out in the open. Selina had brought her scheme to light, making it undeniable truth in the community's eyes. And Ethan, the son I trusted, stood on the other side. My heart broke into pieces, but a new resolve rose, a cold determination. If I had hesitated before, seeing Ethan's forced smile on stage made it clear I had nothing left to lose but the forest. To protect it, I was ready to go to the end, even if it meant facing not just Selina, but my own flesh and blood. After the press conference, I returned home nearly exhausted. Images of the forest turned into a lavish resort, the applause for Selina, and Ethan's forced smile swirled in my mind. I knew that sitting alone would let despair swallow me. I needed a hand extended, an ally to not face this battle alone. The next afternoon, I drove to my old university, where I had taught part-time years ago. Only one name came to mind: Martha, my former colleague, a steadfast biologist who had surveyed this forest with me countless times. I found her in the lab, still slight, her white hair tied high, her eyes bright behind thick glasses. When I walked in, she looked up, astonished. "Clara, my goodness, it's been ages." I sat down, tears unstoppable. I poured out everything: Selina, the forged contracts, the press conference, Ethan standing by his wife like a stranger. Martha listened silently, her thin hand gripping mine. When I finished, she said, "I've heard rumors, and I know this is more serious than you think." She pulled a file from her drawer. "Clara, last week I got info on this project. If the resort is built, the northern area will be destroyed. It's home to rare snow lynxes and at least 2 breeding eagle nests. Once the machines roll in, they'll vanish." She showed me recent photos, a lynx with glowing yellow eyes leading 3 cubs down a snowy slope. My heart clenched. If this project succeeded, those creatures would have no place left. I gripped the file. "Martha, will you help me? This isn't just my family's fight anymore. It's the forest's survival." She nodded without hesitation. "Clara, I'm with you. I'll provide all the data needed, from scientific studies to environmental reports. We must prove this project is a crime against nature." Leaving the university, I sought the second person on my mind, David, the chief ranger of the preserve. I'd known him since my father's time, when he was a young ranger. Now, he managed dozens of rangers, a stern but honest man. At his office, he was organizing maps and patrol reports. He smiled when he saw me, but it faded as I recounted everything. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "I've suspected something for a while. Some state politicians suddenly took interest in this area, citing economic development. But really, they're swayed by interest groups. I didn't want to believe it, but hearing you, I'm certain Selina bribed for their support." David's words were the final knife confirming my fears. Selina hadn't just forged documents. She'd infiltrated the political system, buying off those meant to protect the forest. The truth terrified me, but also fueled a fiercer resolve. That evening, I invited Martha and David to the cabin. Before the crackling fireplace, we spread out documents. Martha had biological data, David had maps and ranger reports, and I had forged contracts, threatening emails, and recordings. We pieced it together, and I knew we needed one more. Grant, my lawyer. I called Grant, then and there. He arrived, laptop in hand, eyes resolute. "We have what we need to start," he said. "A team of 4, a lawyer, a scientist, a ranger, and you, the landowner, the mother, the woman who's dedicated her life to this forest. This isn't just a group of friends, it's a resistance." We jokingly called ourselves the Guardians, the forest's protectors. The name rang through the cabin like a vow. I looked at each face. Martha, aged but bright-eyed. David, stern but honest. Grant, calm but sharp. I was no longer alone. Selina might have money, officials, and investors, but I had truth and people who believed in it. That night, I sat alone after everyone had left. On the table were still the documents, maps spread wide, and my old notebook. I wrote in it, "Today, we formed our ranks. If the forest must fight, we will be its first soldiers." I looked up, and through the window, the forest shadow darkened in the night, as if listening. I knew the forest had never been alone, and now, neither was I. After forming the resistance with Martha, David, and Grant, I felt newfound courage. But before I could savor the relief of not being alone, Selina struck again, more viciously than I could have imagined. The first whispers came from a neighbor. "Clara, I heard you've been getting forgetful lately. Is it true? They say you're refusing to cooperate with the development project, opposing what's good for the community." I froze. I had lived in Montana my whole life, respected for my integrity and clarity. Yet in just weeks, Selina had planted an image of a stubborn, outdated old woman with a fading memory. The rumors spread like wildfire. The next time I visited the grocery store, someone stared and whispered, "Poor thing, she's probably not all there anymore." I walked past, trying to stay composed, but inside, it felt like knives cutting my heart. I knew this was Selina's next move: discredit me, paint me as incapable of making decisions, so her forged contract would become legitimate paperwork. It didn't stop there. A week later, Selina brazenly brought a man in a white coat to the house, introducing him as a psychologist specializing in elderly evaluations. She clung to his arm, smiling sweetly. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're healthy. The doctor will only talk for a few minutes." I looked into the man's eyes, seeing the dishonesty in his smile. I firmly refused. "I don't need anyone assessing my memory. I'm perfectly lucid." But Selina turned to Ethan, feigning concern. "See, she's starting to lose control." Ethan stayed silent, avoiding my gaze, and my heart ached once more. The next day, the news spread. Psychologist confirms Clara, shows signs of memory decline, may need guardianship. Sitting by the fireplace, I held the local paper, seeing my name in a small column. All the evidence came from that doctor's false claims. I was so furious I could barely breathe. Selina wasn't just spreading rumors. She had fabricated a medical narrative to systematically eliminate me. I went to Grant, recounting everything. His tone was grave. "This is a common tactic in elderly asset seizures. They use fake medical records to petition the court to declare someone incompetent. If they succeed, control of your property and land goes to them." I gripped his hand, chilled to the bone. Selina didn't just want wealth. She wanted to erase me from the equation. That evening, fate gave me a chance. I returned early from working with Martha. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard voices from the living room. I crept closer, heart pounding. Selina's voice rang out, cold and sharp as a blade. "Don't worry. The health records are ready. Just a few more reports, and Clara will officially be declared incompetent. Then the contract will pass, and no one can stop us." A male voice replied. I recognized it as Mark Hansen, the administrative officer I once knew. "But we need to be careful. If she finds out," Selina cut him off with a laugh. "She's old. Who's going to believe a senile old woman?" I stood frozen, my hand clutching the small recorder Grant had given me the week before. My heart raced, but I managed to turn it on, letting the device in my pocket capture the entire exchange. As I slipped away, my legs trembled, but a different feeling surged within. My first victory in this covert battle. I had evidence, not rumors, not guesses, but Selina's and her accomplices' own voices, exposing their plot to fake health records, to undermine me. That night, I sat at the desk, replaying the recording. Each word sent shivers down my spine, but also fueled my resolve. I wrote in my journal, "Selina thinks this old woman has no fight left. She's wrong. I'll use their own lies to bury this ambition." As I set the pen down, I looked out the window at the forest's dark silhouette, a silent ally. I understood the battle had escalated. If Selina wanted to brand me incompetent, I would expose her as a fraud before the law. And this time, I had a weapon. The truth recorded in their own voices. The day Selina chose to announce the Greenfront Eco Resort was a beautiful one, with Montana's sky clear and blue. But to me, it was heavy with the threat of a storm. News of the meeting spread through town. People buzzed excitedly that Montana's new era was coming, that the old forest would bring jobs and tourism. Hearing those words, I felt thousands of tiny knives piercing my heart. Years of research, generations of stewardship, now reduced to a commercial product in the community's eyes. The Forest Management Agency's hall was packed that day. Outside hung a large banner, Greenfront Eco Resort, where nature meets development. Below it was a computer-generated image, a lavish resort amidst the forest, with a turquoise pool, wooden villas peeking through trees, and paved roads cutting into the domain of eagles and lynxes. I paused under the banner, a lump in my throat, then entered with Grant, Martha, and David. The atmosphere inside was festive, like a celebration. The front row held local officials in crisp suits, nodding to each other. Reporters aimed cameras, flashes popping constantly. On stage, Selina stood in the bright lights, her smile radiant. She wore an elegant teal dress, holding the microphone with the poise of a confident leader. Beside her stood Ethan, in a dark suit and red tie, his face tense, but forcing a smile. I looked at my son, my heart aching. A piece of my flesh and blood stood with the betrayer. Selina's voice rang clear. The Greenfront Eco Resort will bring not just millions to Montana, but a new era of sustainable tourism. We will preserve the forest while developing the community. This is the path to the future. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Many stood to cheer. I sat in the back row, my hands trembling as they clutched my bag. The flyers passed around, showed my beloved forest as a tourism product, with streams and meadows turned into attractions. A small line at the bottom read, "Project approved by landowner Clara W." I could barely breathe. My name had been turned into a legal talisman for this scheme. Grant touched my shoulder, whispering, "It's time." I nodded, stood, and walked forward. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, drawing eyes. I stepped onto the stage, locking eyes with Selina. Her smile faltered briefly, but quickly returned, radiant. "Mom, it's wonderful you're here to celebrate the project with us. Have you changed your mind?" I stopped center stage, my voice resounding. "No, Selina, I'm not here to celebrate, but to expose the truth. This project isn't conservation, it's a deceitful scheme." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Ethan stared at me, his face frozen. Reporters swung their cameras toward me. I held up the file. "This is a land exploitation contract in my name, but the signature is forged. This is an anonymous email, threatening me to stay silent, and this." I pulled out the small recorder and pressed play. Selina's voice echoed through the speakers. "Just a few more reports, and Clara will officially be declared incompetent. Then the contract will pass, and no one can stop us." The hall fell silent. Jaws dropped. Ethan turned to Selina, his lips trembling. Reporters surged forward, flashes like lightning. Grant stepped up, his voice firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard undeniable evidence. There's a conspiracy to forge documents and medical records to strip Clara W. of her legal rights. This isn't development. It's a legal and environmental crime." Martha stood beside him, opening a thick report. "I'm a biologist who studied this forest for 25 years. If this project proceeds, at least 2 eagle nests will vanish, and the rare snow lynx will go extinct here. This isn't just a local loss, it's a global one." She held up photos of a lynx and eagle chicks. Gasps echoed in the room. David, the chief ranger, spread a large map on the table. "This is the habitat of many rare species. If roads and villas are built, they'll be fragmented, with nowhere to live. My team has patrolled for years to keep this place pristine. Today, I declare, this project is a death sentence for the ecosystem." Selina lost her composure. Her face paled, then flushed red. She lunged for the microphone, her voice shrill. "This is all fabricated. Those recordings could be edited. Those reports are fake. You're trying to sabotage progress for a selfish old woman's whims. Grant responded calmly. If you claim the recording is edited, we're ready for forensic analysis. If you say the reports are fake, let's have an independent scientific panel verify. But I have a question. Why is Mark Hansen's voice, an administrative officer, in that recording? And why did he help forge the seal to legitimize the documents? All eyes turned to a middle-aged man in the officials' row. Hansen bowed his head, sweat beading on his forehead. Reporters aimed cameras at him. Under pressure, he stood, his voice trembling. I just followed orders. I was paid. I didn't think it would get this serious. Selina screamed. Shut up. You're not allowed to say anything. But it was too late. The hall had heard, and the truth was laid bare. A council member stood, his face stern. The Greenfront Eco Resort project is hereby suspended. A federal investigation will be launched, and the case will be referred to judicial authorities. The hall erupted. Some clapped, others murmured. Reporters scrambled to record. Selina staggered, then slammed her hand on the table, shouting, You can't do this. I poured in so much effort, so much money. I won't let a useless old woman ruin everything. Her shrill voice echoed, raw and unmasked. Cameras flashed, capturing her twisted, furious face, revealing her true nature, greedy, ambitious, ruthless. I stood silently, watching the scene. My heart ached, but also felt lighter. My daughter-in-law had finally shown her true face before the public. Stripped of her disguise, I turned to Ethan. He sat frozen, eyes vacant, lips trembling. In that moment, I knew his heart was breaking. He had to face the truth. As the meeting ended, police escorted Selina and Hansen for questioning. The council issued a press release on the spot. The news hit the airwaves, spreading across Montana. I stepped out of the hall, taking a deep breath of the mountain air. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I knew this wasn't the end. Selina might still fight, might still sue, but today, before the entire town, I had won a crucial victory, not just for myself, but for the forest, which stood tall, silently witnessing and waiting to be protected. And I told myself, the battle continues, but the forest will never be alone again. After that fiery confrontation at the Forest Management Agency, the atmosphere in Montana shifted. Overnight, Selina went from being hailed as a pioneering businesswoman to the center of a federal investigation. Headlines blared, Greenfront project suspended, suspected fraud and forgery. My name appeared too, but this time not with suspicion but with respect. 58-year-old woman bravely exposes dark conspiracy. Selina was questioned by police for hours. The court froze Greenfront's accounts. Investors pulled out. The company office closed, and employees vanished. Clearly, the environmental corporation was a facade, and when light shone on it, it crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. Meanwhile, Ethan returned home looking haggard. He sat slumped on the wooden porch, head in hands, silent for hours. I watched from a distance, my heart heavy. This wasn't the strong son I once knew, but a man broken by his own naivety and blind love. Finally, he looked up, eyes red. I was wrong, Mom. It was all lies. Selina never loved me like I thought. She only wanted the forest, the money, the power, and I stood with her, against you. I sat beside him but didn't hug him as I once would have. Between us now was a chasm widened by the betrayal of recent months. Selina was brought home under police supervision, awaiting trial. As she stepped in, she erupted in rage. Her once beautiful face twisted with anger and despair. She lunged at Ethan, screaming, "It's you! It's all your fault! If you hadn't dragged me to Montana, if you knew how to protect me, I wouldn't be in this mess. You're useless, weak. I lost everything because of you." Ethan froze, then stood, his voice breaking. "No, Selina, you lost everything because of your own greed and lies. You made my mother out to be senile, forged her signature, bribed officials. I was blind to let you do it, but I'm not blind anymore." Selina shrieked, trembling as she pointed at me. "You're the real culprit. If you weren't so stubborn, so selfish, the project would have succeeded, and we'd be rich. You ruined my future." I looked into her eyes, my voice calm but cold. "Selina, What future is built on deceit and destruction? You didn't just betray me, you betrayed the forest, betrayed life itself, and that no one can forgive. Like a cornered animal, Selina screamed, "You'll all pay for this. I won't let it go." But her frenzied eyes only drew pitying shakes of heads from the officers. They led her away, the cold clink of handcuffs echoing in the cabin. As the door closed, Ethan collapsed to the floor. He sobbed like a child, shoulders shaking. "Mom, can you forgive me? I didn't protect you, didn't protect the forest. I let Selina lead me astray. I'm truly sorry." I stood still. The mother in me wanted to run to him, hold him, erase everything. But memories flooded back, the press conference, his forced smile beside Selina, his words cutting like a knife. "Mom, why don't you want me to have a better future?" I took a deep breath, holding back tears, and said slowly, "Ethan, a mother's love can forgive. A mother always loves her son, even when he strays, but the forest can never be betrayed. Once ancient trees are cut, once lynxes and eagles vanish, no apology can undo it. Remember that." Ethan buried his face in his hands, sobbing. I stood and walked to the porch. The sunset bathed the forest in gold, the breeze carrying the rich scent of pine. I knew the legal battle would be long, but I also knew I had won a major fight. Selina was exposed, Greenfront collapsed, and Ethan, my son, had finally awakened. In my heart, bitterness and maternal love intertwined, but above all was an unshakable belief. The forest stood eternal as a witness, and I, no matter the loss or pain, would protect it until my last breath. In the days after Selina's arrest and Greenfront's collapse, Montana seemed to don a new cloak. Gone were the resort flyers, the deceitful press conferences, the fear that the old forest would become a concrete construction site. Instead, I heard the forest's voice again, the wind flapping through the trees, distant deer calls, the babbling stream mingling with morning bird song. For so long, those sounds had been drowned by anxiety and bitterness. Now they returned, pure like an ancient melody welcoming me back. I resumed my research. The old notebook, once forgotten in a corner, opened to fresh pages. I recorded bird counts, lynx tracks in the snow, elk migration paths. With Martha and David, I felt young again, as if we were starting a new chapter in our conservation journey. One of the most unforgettable moments was the day we released 2 young eagles, found injured near the mountains. They had been nursed at the conservation station. Today, their wings strong, they were returned to the sky. Ethan, David, and I stood in the valley. As the cage doors opened, the birds took flight, soaring high, circling the deep blue sky. Their powerful wing beats echoed, leaving a sacred feeling in us. I looked up, tears streaming. Those birds weren't just freed, they symbolized the rebirth of freedom, of the forest, and of my heart. Ethan stood beside me, silently watching. He said nothing, only gripped his hands, eyes following the sky. Finally, he turned to me, voice hoarse. "Mom, let me join you. I know I was wrong, but I want to make amends. I want to do what's right, not for me, but for the forest, for everything." I looked at my son, the boy who once held my hand camping, who promised to protect the forest, then fell to lies. In his eyes now was a new spark, small but genuine. I nodded. "Ethan, the forest never turns away the sincere. You can start today. No redemption is greater than action." From that day, Ethan joined David on patrols, learning to identify animal tracks and record field observations. Once, Martha told me he spent hours in the forest, just filming a rare black squirrel. I didn't say it aloud, but my heart felt lighter. Perhaps the forest itself would heal the rift between me and my son. One afternoon, while sorting documents, I received an international envelope. It bore the blue logo of a global conservation organization. Inside was a formal letter. "We have followed your story through the media. We admire your courage and determination in exposing fraud and protecting Montana's old-growth forest. We respectfully invite you to attend the International Conservation Conference in Geneva to share the role of guardians of the old forest. We believe your story will inspire generations." I sat quietly for hours, holding the letter. For years, I had worked in silence, writing reports and sending them to obscure scientific journals. Now, my story, a widow living in a wooden cabin by the forest, was invited to be shared with the world. But I knew this wasn't a personal victory. It was the voice of the forest, of the eagles, the lynxes, and every tree breathing in the wind. That evening, I sat with Ethan on the porch. The moon was bright, the forest shimmering in silver light. I handed him the letter. He read it, his eyes welling up. "Mom, you deserve this. I'm proud of you. I'm just starting over, but I promise I'll follow the path you've walked." I placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling. "It's not about how fast or slow you go, but that you choose the right side, and this time, you've chosen the truth." The day I left Montana for Geneva, Martha and David saw me off at the train station. Martha hugged me tightly, whispering, "Tell the world this forest isn't just Montana's, it's humanity's." David shook my hand, his eyes resolute. "We'll keep watch here, don't worry." Ethan stood nearby, silent, but his eyes shone with newfound faith. As the train pulled away, I looked out the window, seeing the forest stretch endlessly, the snow-capped mountains glowing in the afternoon sun. In that moment, I felt the forest's whisper, "You're not alone, we stand together." I knew the journey ahead would hold more challenges, but I also knew that from little Montana, this story would echo far. And the final message I wanted to share with the world was sometimes, to protect true beliefs and values, we must dare to stand against even our dearest loved ones. For a mother's love can forgive, but nature and truth, once betrayed, never return. 3 months after the Geneva conference, I returned to Montana on an early autumn morning. The air was crisp and fresh, as if I were stepping into a new world, though the dirt road to my wooden cabin was the same familiar path. In my hand was an honorary certificate from the international organization, Guardian of Montana's Old Forest, Clara Williams. The conference had given me the chance to share my story with hundreds of scientists, politicians, and young people from around the world. I spoke of the old forest, the young eagles released to the sky, the snow lynxes, and the conspiracy I faced. When I said, at times, to uphold true values, I had to stand against my own son, the hall fell silent. I didn't speak to complain, but to show that protecting nature isn't a distant concept. It's a battle within families, communities, where interests and emotions clash fiercely, and I chose the forest. When I finished, I received a prolonged standing ovation. Many approached to hug me, thanking me for daring to voice a truth others feared. A young student said, "Your story made me decide to study conservation. I want to be like you." I realized that sometimes personal wounds can become strength for others if we dare to tell the truth. Back in Montana, Ethan was waiting at the station. He wore the old jacket he used on patrols with David, holding a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the forest's edge. Seeing me, he gave a shy smile and said softly, "Mom, welcome back. I've done what you asked. I've been patrolling regularly, learning to take notes, even helped David free a trapped deer." I looked at my son, seeing the change. Gone was the confused, lost look from when he stood by Selina, or the despair when he collapsed in the cabin. Now, he was a new Ethan, tired, but with a purpose. I hugged him, feeling the distance between us begin to fade, though the scars of the past would remain. Selina was gone from our lives. The case of document fraud, falsified medical records, and bribery led to serious criminal charges. The media reported her once radiant image, now bowed in the courtroom, shocking many. Ethan attended the trial once, not to defend her, but to see the truth. His wife had used and betrayed him. Returning, he said calmly, "I've closed that chapter. Now I just want to move forward with you in the forest." The days that followed returned to a peaceful rhythm. I spent mornings by the stream, observing animal tracks. In the afternoons, Ethan and I joined Martha and David's small group, teaching town children to identify bird calls, plant trees, and care for nature. Watching those young faces light up at a squirrel leaping between branches, I realized the forest's future didn't rest only with old folks like me, but in the hands of the next generations. One day, we held an event to release a flock of birds back to the forest. Dozens of townsfolk joined, including some who had once believed in Greenfront. They stood silently as the birds took flight, many shedding tears. An elderly man approached, shaking my hand. I believed Selina once. Now I see you were right. Thank you for not giving up. His words were proof that, though misunderstood at times, the truth eventually shines through. Ethan, during these gatherings, often sat quietly taking notes, like a student starting anew, but I knew he was relearning how to love the forest, how to live true to himself. I wasn't quick to fully forgive, but I gave him a chance, for if I didn't believe in redemption, I couldn't believe in the forest, where every spring, trees sprout anew after winter storms. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Ethan asked, "Mom, do you ever regret choosing the forest over me?" I looked at him, sighing. "I never chose the forest over you. I chose it for you. If the forest is destroyed, what world will you live in? If truth is buried, what will you learn about yourself? You may stray, but I couldn't let your generation lose its foundation. That's why I fought." Ethan was silent, then leaned his head on my shoulder. I knew he understood. That winter I kept writing. Not just scientific reports. I wrote my life story about the fight against fraud, about standing up even when the enemy was family. I wanted those words to reach others, to show that justice and nature aren't for sale. As I closed the manuscript, I wrote the final line: "A mother's love can forgive, but the forest must never be betrayed. For the forest is life, and life belongs only to those who protect it." In the nights that followed, I often sat alone on the porch, gazing at the starry sky. Somewhere in the forest, an owl hooted. Night animals called to each other. I felt peace, not the peace of an ending, but of a new beginning. I may not live forever to see all the changes, but I know when I'm gone, Ethan, Martha, David, and today's children will carry on. The forest will have new guardians, keepers of the forest, continuing through time, and I, Clara Williams, will close this journey in serenity, for I've learned that sometimes we must dare to stand against our own flesh and blood to uphold true values. For love, without truth, is an empty shell, and the forest, once lost, will never return. That night, as the wind blew through the trees, I heard a whisper. "Thank you, Clara. We're still here." I smiled, whispering back, "No, it's the forest that saved me." And this story will forever echo for those who stand for truth. If you believe nature and truth are always worth protecting, please subscribe to join me in this journey. Thank you for listening to my story. See you in the next video, with more tales of rebirth and unforgettable lessons.